30-second board time. There are so many hot topics to run down, and it starts actually with the building. I would imagine it's a big logistical problem to hold a race like this in the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum these days, but it had to be done, JT. It really did have an aura about it, although you and I like to joke that that aura is older than most of the riders racing. I don't know how many of them realize the history, but the peristyle going up and down, that's the first building that ever held a real Supercross. You had to have it. We had to race there.
Yeah, it was great. I raced there back in 1998, and I was thinking about this over the weekend. Talking to riders about that race in 1998 would have been like talking to me about a race that happened there in 1973, or even maybe the Super Bowl of motocross a year earlier in 1972. You just don't have much reference for it, right? I knew what went on similar to them. Some of them weren't even born yet. So it's a really difficult thing for them to have any perspective. But for those of us who have been around, who can remember those races and all the things that have happened out in and outside of our sport, what a great place to wrap up the inaugural SuperMotocross World Championship.
Yeah, it just completely poetic how it worked out 51 years after the first Supercross to do what that was, a combined Supercross, motocross type race in the building. Couldn't have gotten any better. Then we get to the racing, and we had teased the 3 riders in each class, winner take all, but unfortunately went bust. It's been an amazing season for Hunter Lawrence, but he comes up 1 race short.
Yeah, that was tough. It was tough to watch. You could see the pain in him when he was scooting away from his pre-race interview there. And you look back on 2023, it has been a wild success story for Hunter Lawrence, and you thought, man, he's just going to cap it off. This is the way to go out of this 250 career. Unfortunately, we didn't get that. He had a big crash on Friday, and let's just hope it's not something that lingers throughout the offseason, because he didn't look like he was very comfortable there on Saturday night.
So Hayden Deegan ends up winning this world championship. Hunter's out, but it didn't make it easy on him. Joe Shimoda gave it everything he had. I tried to interview Deegan after a very disappointing 5th in the first moto, and he was battling for the lead at one point in that one, and he was not willing to talk. I don't even know if he realized I was there. I kept trying to get his attention, and he was in such a zone of disappointment. To think that about an hour later he was going to be holding the world championship, it's hard to believe, but maybe that's the Deegan thing. Every time it seems like this kid's about to take a step down the ladder, he stabilizes it and comes back. I mean, that was really clutch from the 17-year-old to get this done.
It was, and I've been in a similar state of mind to where you were trying to get his attention and he wasn't recognizing that. For me, it was, I knew I was going to say something that I would regret. I wasn't able to contain my emotions. Something was going to come out of my mouth that wasn't going to be okay. So I would just try to remove myself from the situation. Now, I don't know if that's where Hayden was, but I bet he just was in no place to talk. He wasn't in a place to be cordial and talk to America yet. So sometimes you just have to know that about yourself and avoid it. But man, what a bounce back. I saw somewhere where Brian Deegan, his message to Hayden was, hey, it's not over yet, right? That's why there are 2 motos in this. We need to regroup, refocus, and come back out there. And it was a totally different Hayden in Moto 2, composed, no mistakes, was able to stay up there and do exactly what he needed to get that championship.
Let's go to the 250 final standings and prize money, the triple points. We knew that would be wild going in, but I don't think we realized how wild it was going to end up being. Jordan Smith wins the first moto and suddenly is in contention for the title. And in the end, RJ Hampshire, who JT, I felt like the playoffs were a dud for him. It was not as good as I expected it to be. He ends up 3rd. He wins $150,000 for 3rd. It was all over the map for these guys.
It was wild to watch all of those things unfold. And the triple points, again, was really what got crazy. But to see, the one that jumped off the page to me was the drop down from Hunter with missing the 3rd round. And then RJ Hampshire jumping up $100,000, right? Went from $50,000 to $150,000 with a really strong performance at the finale. So I think it will be a learning lesson for a lot of these riders as they go into 2024, knowing what can happen, knowing how incredibly important and valuable every point will be, and then how important it is to be really strong late in the series, because you can have life-changing money just from one really strong night in LA.
Okay, so many great stories come out of this one, JT, but unfortunately there are downsides. We didn't really see many crashes or injuries at all at the first 2 rounds, but we saw a ton of big get-offs and even small ones that had a big impact at Super Motocross Finale in Los Angeles, I guess the biggest one has got to be Chase Sexton. Had he had won that second moto, he still probably would not have won the title. He would have been edged for the overall. He would have had a 3-1, and Jett Lawrence would have had a 1-2. But for him to go out a winner, I think would have meant something, and then instead he goes out pretty banged up. That was a vicious hit for starters.
Yeah, for one, let's hope he's okay. For him to be able to walk out of the stadium, I'm hoping for the best there. The last thing you want to do is get an injury in the final race of the season. We all, we hear rumors that he's switching teams. I'm sure we'll get some sort of PR soon. But that means a lot of testing, a lot of adjustment, and a lot of change. And to start that injured is not ideal. So I think for Chase Sexton, first, it's being healthy. A little bit of disappointment, sure. But man, his pace was really impressive until it wasn't. And if you wanted to look at a synopsis of how it's gone for Chase Sexton at times this year, it's been incredible pace and an untimely crash, right? Even though he was our Monster Energy Supercross champion, there were so many weekends where the narrative was, man, if Chase could just stay off the ground. And maybe it was fitting. Maybe it was fitting for him to go out the last time, showing us again that he was ready for change because he crashed again in the lead.
Yeah, that was Oakland, Seattle, you name it, right there once again. And he does drop back and lose his chance at the world title with that also. And then other riders, Dylan Ferrandis, don't forget, he was on the podium at our first race at Charlotte. He ends up crashing out instantly in the first moto here, loses a ton of money because he didn't come back for moto number 2. And Barcia was leading the first moto. He endos, and he was out. So we had these borderline, what could happen in this playoff contenders? Unfortunately for them, it didn't end the way they hoped.
Yeah, the Barcia one was a bummer, right? He's leading the race. We'd all been waiting for Barcia to get fully back to health, and now he looks to have this big setback again. Be interested to see what the final diagnosis was on his injuries, but again, it's the same thing as Sexton. The last thing you want to do is enter the off season not healthy, right? It's supposed to be a time for recovery, get your body fully back, mentally prepare again so you can go into 2024 healthy, not take a giant step back and have to hopefully not be on some sort of operating table. So it was a bummer. We almost saw Jett Lawrence had the exact same crash that Justin Barcia had. And when there's that much money at stake and these guys are pushing the limit, unfortunately, these things happen.
So Sexton's out, but one other rider remained, and that was Ken Roczen. When Jett Lawrence passed him in the first moto, it looked like he was going to get away. He passed Roczen quickly. Roczen adapted. He started jumping that quad onto the table that Jett was doing. He stuck with him into the end. Second moto was sticking with him there. Got thwarted by one of the Hill brothers there. Lap traffic late, but honestly, these 3 weeks, as good as we've seen Ken Roczen in a long time. It was impressive. He skipped most of the Pro Motocross Championship. To me, that helped him stay fresh physically, not worn down like he usually gets. In a short series like this, he was lightning.
Yeah, Kenny was really impressive. And I think the highlight of that for me was his ability to adjust. Now, you could take the other side of that coin and say, had he adjusted quicker or had he be the instigator of these quicker lines, then maybe he walks out of there as your champion. But to his credit, he did figure out where Jett was faster, what Jett was utilizing to get to the front, and insert those into his own approach. So, yes, if anything, I think he's learning where Jett's tricks are, where Jett has an edge on the competition, and maybe that's something he can apply to 2024. But I will probably always look back on this race and think about just Kenny being a little bit late to the punch on figuring the quad out, the different line in the sand. And when you look at where Jett was a little better, that was it. Everywhere else, Kenny was as good or better. It was just Jett being quicker to sort out a couple of sections, and that made all the difference.
So now let's talk about Jett Lawrence. I know that after a 22-0 motocross season, him winning this doesn't seem like a surprise, but there's probably a point that we didn't dig into deep enough, which is this was the first full, pretty much Supercross track of these playoffs. Jett is yet to race a 450 Supercross, and he ended up beating Chase Sexton straight up, passed him, left him in the first moto. That put him in position to do that without having ridden a 450 Supercross race before. Just another impressive performance.
Yeah, Jett is, we have to remember he is brand new to Supercross, as you mentioned, and a nod to Will Christian bringing that up during the broadcast is he doesn't have experience sorting out the bike, working through changing conditions about how that's going to affect the motorcycle. And to that point, I walked over to Honda HRC on Friday afternoon after their free practice, and the bike was completely torn down. The forks were off, the shock was off, they were making chassis adjustments, which speaks to Jett working through this process, changing track, changing traction, and how does Jett respond to the bike? Like, I think he's still learning how the bike's going to react in those conditions, but boy, did he figure it out Saturday night. And he was innovating. He was the guy that everybody was looking to. Okay, what's the fastest way through this section? Let's see what Jett's doing, right? So to be 20 years old and not ever having truly raced a 450 Supercross yet, a Monster Energy Supercross, and everybody already kind of taking his lead as far as how to approach the racetrack, it bodes very well for Jett Lawrence, to say the least.
Okay, let's talk the actual payout, because we've been teasing this, the $5.5 million on the line in SMX all year. So let's show how this actually looks. First at the top, the big story is that Jett Lawrence gets $1 million as your 450 champ. But let's not forget, JT, there are individual race purse bonuses as well. $100,000 winning last week and this week, for example, just for winning the race. So that pushes it way over $1 million total for him.
Yeah, money everywhere. And I guess if you're the best in the world at anything, there's going to be a lot of money involved with it. But yes, the financial consideration for these races could be felt everywhere. Didn't matter if you talk to Jett Lawrence or a privateer, the money was top of mind. And it's a great thing. You know, some of them it's going to affect more than others, but it was something that was on every rider's mind going into this finale.
And then we know the story at the top, like we said, Jett Lawrence and Hayden Deegan win, but it's not just winning this world championship. It's symbolic of how quick the sea change has come. We started this year celebrating the brilliance of Eli Tomac, who is now out with injury. He will be back. But to think that 450 rookie Jett Lawrence wins 2 titles in a row in his first 2 450 shots at it, and Hayden Deegan, who was an amateur a year ago, wins this and was so great throughout the regular season. Wow, that is a bright future for this sport.
Yeah, whether it's the stars of Saturday night, you know, Jett Lawrence, Hayden Deegan are both incredibly young, and they take home championships, 2 of the youngest riders in both classes. You think about the 250 World All-Stars, you think about the Super Minis, and then you go back to those 65s that are jumping triples in Charlotte. Across the board, there is so much talent. We've got a glimpse and a snapshot of what's to come, and it certainly looks awesome.
Yeah, if the future is Lawrence brothers and Deegan battling both on and off the track, that's going to be really fun to watch.
Hi folks, Lee Diffie from NBC Sports here. If you truly enjoyed what you just watched, you can get more news, interviews, and highlights by subscribing to the Motorsports on NBC YouTube page. You can get it all, so go for it.